So my friend, please give a warm Montreal welcome to Mr. Garry Kasparov. Thank you.
I feel like I already finished my speech. Yeah, I'm used to promote free spirit, but it was literally free spirit. So that's something quite memorable. Yeah, and okay. Thank you, Michelle. I'm always terrified to hear any introductions because we live in the era of Wikipedia and people read news about you on the internet, and sometimes, you know, you are learning a lot about your own life by sitting in the audience. So it didn't happen today. So, you know, I'm really honored to be part of this George Lengvari Senior Lecture Series. And yesterday I got a book from a junior. Yeah, I had a glance and just go through the book, and I had no idea insurance could be so exciting. Yeah. And what is just, you know, it's also was some kind of a connection because I'm an immigrant myself, though I've changed countries several times, or to be more precise, my country changed under my feet. Yeah. Yeah, I was born in the Soviet Union in 1963, so in the city of Baku. Yeah, when I speak to an American audience, I always say that I was born and raised in the deep south, right next to Georgia. Which is true because Azerbaijan was bordering the Republic of Georgia. Yeah, and it's a Jewish father, Armenian mother. Yeah, and we had to flee our own city after Armenian pogroms in 1990, January 1990, and I never came back to Baku since. We lived in Moscow. We thought that it was a natural transition because as many citizens of an empire, we moved to the capital after the collapse of the empire. And people asked me many times about my decision to move from Baku to Moscow, and I said, look, I was born in the country where Moscow was the capital, and I kept living in the country where Moscow was the capital. So, but their life played another trick. And in 2013, facing imminent arrest, so I decided just time to move further west. Yeah, I joined my wife in New York, and that's the only risk in New York City being probably politically prosecuted because I have conservative and libertarian views in liberal New York. Yeah. I'm very happy to be among friends here at Montreal Economic Institute, and of course, I'm always glad to talk about topics dear to my heart, individual freedom and frontier spirit. Can we call it traditional Canadian values? When I have, when I rise to such occasions, I always think, what would my die-hard communist grandfather thought of me standing here? and delivering the speech on the free market and the collapse of the Soviet Union. So growing up in the Soviet Union in the 70s, it had a feeling of, you know, living every day in the battle of civilizations. It's the 1972, Spassky Fischer. It's just in the height of the Cold War, the American champion, you know, facing the Soviet machine. Ironically, many of us in the Soviet Union, including myself, rooted for Fischer. Yeah, so, yeah. It was huge. Recently, I watched the movie, you know, The Pawn Sacrifice. Again, I'm not very happy with all the details in the movie, but I recommend you to watch it. To be released here in Canada soon, because it has a good projection of euphoria in the United States and following of chess and excitement created by Bobby Fischer, and it reflects, you know, the craziness of his character quite well. So this match was big, and as I said, you know, many of us rooted for Fischer, but there was another big event followed Spassky Fischer. I guess many of you remembered, World Series, ice hockey. And I have to say that, you know, I was rooting for Soviet team, and I nearly had a heart attack, if you can imagine a heart attack for a 9-year-old kid, when Canadians won the last match, 6-5, Henderson scored. It was so close. It was so close. I just remember vividly at the last minute, Henderson scoring after Esposito gave him a pass. Terrible, terrible. Oh. So, you know, for us it was really a battle of civilizations. And I remember the commentaries. You know, the Canadian professionals, they're not playing, you know, fair. It was like, you know, a conflict, you know, like the Star Wars. Yeah, you know, of course, I learned later on that these sentiments were shared across the ocean, because for many people here, you know, Fischer, Spassky, and in the ice hockey summit, you know, there were big events, and then probably the first time when you could see the, you know, sort of a peaceful, though you may not call it peaceful, but not sort of a military, not a political confrontation, but something that happened at the chessboard or on ice. And I thought it was a good break from the confrontational concepts. And then later I realized that in the Soviet Union, chess, when people ask me nowadays whether chess was part of the school program in the Soviet Union, I said, no. It's a gross misunderstanding of the concept of chess in the Soviet Union. It has been used in my country, in my former country, sort of as an ideological weapon to prove the intellectual superiority of the Soviet Union, the communist system, or decadent West. By the way, that was my original phrase, exactly copied in Pawn Sacrifice. Word to word, they used it there. And I'm the last person on the planet to complain about that, because I was one of the beneficiaries. Because the whole system was built to find talents, and there were millions of kids who could be checked for their chess talent, and the lucky ones, the talented ones, could be taken care of and offered full assistance to become big champions. So it was not until I had a chance to travel abroad where I just could see the world slightly differently. And my first travel was in 1976, highly unusual for a 30-year-old kid from Baku to travel to France. That's, you know, very few people, you know, just traveled outside of the Soviet Union, set aside to the West, not to Bulgaria or Hungary or any Eastern European country, but to the West, you know. And when I came back, I guess I was the only one, not in just in my school, but probably, you know, just in my part of town, who ever just, you know, visited the capitalist country. No, thanks to my also upbringing, I had very interesting controversies at home, because we're talking about my intellectual journey. And on one side, I had my die-hard communist grandfather, who was quite puzzled, baffled at the end of his life, seeing, you know, the long lines for food, because he was a member of the Communist Party since 1931. And he couldn't understand why 50 years later, you know, we were still struggling. So, and on the other side, I had my father's family. My father died, unfortunately, sadly, when I was 7. But his younger brother, my uncle Leonid, helped me to meet, Jewish intellectuals in Baku, so I could read other books, the books that were not available in the Soviet stores. So I could start measuring, just both things, and I could smell that something was wrong. Yeah. I remember, there's some stories that, that had an impact on me. In 1980, first time I played for the mighty Soviet team. We went to the Olympiad, Chess Olympiad. I was 17, first time, the Soviet team, Anatoly Karpov, world champion, board 1. I was the second reserve. We won, actually, hate to say, competing with Hungary. Yeah, it was that close, yes. But we won, yes. The Hungary won in 1978, and I think we would be having very tough time coming back, losing the second one in the row. So the Hungarians won in 78, but in 1980 we managed, just in the last second, just on a tie break. Yeah, flying back from Malta to Moscow, we stopped in Rome, and we just had a day or so there. And of course, my adult colleagues, they went to see Michelangelo, Sixtine Chapels, and other things, and I bought a ticket to see the Star Wars. Empire Strikes Back. Yeah, and it's just like a vivid memory. I remember very little, but just one phrase, got stuck in my mind just for the rest of my life. So, and I always use it in my speeches because it's like a motto when they enter the asteroid fields. And Han Solo is told that the chances to survive an asteroid field is 3,720 to 1. And his response was, never tell me the odds. and any time, when I was, just losing badly, just hitting the wall, never tell me the odds. So I was trailing 5-0 playing first match with Karpov. What was the chance of surviving? 5-0, he needed one more victory to crush me, and he never did it, because I remember odds sometimes are irrelevant. We had a lot of discussions about politics with my entourage, within the family, there was something interesting, that is, even people in the Soviet Union had very critical view of the Soviet system. There was still a dominant or prevailing opinion that there was nothing wrong with socialism. It was all about distortions of socialism by Stalin. And if we could recover the original ideas, great ideas of Lenin, going back to the roots of 1917 revolution, things could improve. And trust me, it was really prevailing view. Even such great minds like Andrei Sakharov, they believed that, there were advantages of the socialist system that could be somehow discovered. And one man who had influenced me was my great teacher, former world champion Mikhail Botvinnik, who spent many years after, retiring from chess in the 60s, working with young talents, and I was his favorite pupil, student, and also working on some form of AI. And Botvinnik kept telling me that, Gary, where the socialist system is still running behind, but if we can have a very powerful computer, if we can just calculate all the options, and see, how to build the comprehensive strategy, it will prove its superiority over free market. Oh, I've been listening to all the stories, and I grew up, just as a teenager, believing that probably, we could change things inside Soviet system, and to make it not just competitive, but even superior. But gradually, it has been, the fog has been disappearing, and I just could see the light. Yeah. Also, let's not forget the 70s. There was a time when the West was, I wouldn't say in decline, but after the Vietnam War, and the rise of the left, it looked from outside as that the West had systemic problems while in the Soviet Union we could have probably implementation problems. I'm trying to sort of reconstruct the atmosphere, the intellectual atmosphere where I grew. And then I read Archipelago Gulag of Alexander Solzhenitsyn. So, and then I just thought, this is probably, Lenin was not innocent. Yeah, now just suddenly you can start reading stuff, and I, you know, I had analytical mind, so I couldn't yet verify it, but I knew that something was wrong, and the sort of the Soviet invasion of Hungary in '56 or Czechoslovakia in '68, they were not just accidental mistakes by aging Politburo, but rather than, you know, the logical continuation of the policies started not by Stalin, but Lenin himself. Step by step, I just realized that my problems were not with just the sports committee, with some officials. The problem was not within just, you know, the current environment, but I could see the inherent vice of socialism. What you know, helped me is just, you know, that the change in the Politburo with Gorbachev taking over. That was a great moment, and I became the world champion that year, and we all had big expectations, because that was what the Soviet intelligentsia has been waiting for a long, long time. A reformer, somebody who could change system from inside. Yeah, you know, I think it was very important that, you know, we could actually see not just limitations, but, you know, the actual dead end, that where the system was literally hitting the wall with no ways to improve. In 1989, I had my interview for Playboy magazine, which was, I would say, a challenge to Soviet authorities. It was still banned in the Soviet Union. They had the big interviews, comprehensive interviews. And I wanted just to read the exact quote from the interview, because at that time I already began formulating my views of the Soviet Union and of the world. I said, this country is in trouble. I meant Soviet Union. The economy is on the verge of being destroyed. We have to take strong measures immediately. Private enterprise must be released. Economic activity has to be open to the market, and the people must be given political freedom. It's hard for me to know whether Gorbachev is moving so slowly because that's all he can do, or because he really doesn't want to change everything. Remember, he's still a communist. Right now, I'm afraid that the changes of perestroika so far are only cosmetic. We need real reforms if we are going to save the state. Not bad. It's 1989. Yeah. Okay, I have to say that I still kept at that time my Communist card, my Communist Party card. I had no choice but to joining it if I wanted to beat Karpov in the Soviet Union. I gave it up in January 1990. So that's one of the first, if not the first, you know, who did it publicly in the Soviet Union. But actually, I could have looked much better without the last sentence. When I said we need real reforms if we're going to save the state. But it would be dishonest of me to leave this last sentence off here today. Because in 1989, in summer 1989, I understood communism needed to die, but still had trouble imagining the end of the USSR. Exactly 1 year later, in an interview for biography of me, I had moved on to the last logical step, to the last frontier. I told the author of the book, quote, communism is dead. Next year in 1991, the Soviet Union will not exist. Definitely, mark my words. Next year, there will be no more evil empire. We will have private property in my country. Many of the republics will have their independence. Direct quote. In the book, the author knows that he rolled his eyes and thought about how optimistic and naive I was to believe such stupid things. But by then, I could clearly see the true colors of Gorbachev reforms. And when Gorbachev publicly said that he wanted to build a socialism with a human face. My instant reaction was, Frankenstein also had a human face. Ironically, Gorbachev is still hailed as a hero in the West for completely failing in his mission. I always told Gorbachev's fans and supporters in the West, I wish you could speak Russian and to hear what he said. You know, he had great interpreters, but, you know, just listen what he said, you know. Don't try to imagine things for him. He was very blunt with his message. He wanted to preserve communist system. And he tried desperately, and he failed. Okay, thanks for our country, and thanks for the world. And just one more episode from those days. In 1990, in September 1990, I played Anatoly Karpov, our 5th World Championship match. We started in New York City, we moved to Lyon, France, and I was the first Soviet athlete who refused to play under the Soviet flag, demanded to have Russian flag, Russian 3-color flag next to me. It was. I remember it's when we went to. I was invited to. I think it was CBS this morning. I'm not sure, one of the big 3 channels, the morning show, and my mother tried to compose a Russian flag because nobody knew how it looked like. So I said, "What is this?" I said, "This is a Russian flag." So and I had this homemade Russian flag. With me there, and we could survive with this flag for four games, because eventually the International Chess Federation, under pressure of the Soviets, demanded the removal, but we removed Soviet flag as well. So at least we played without flags. So that's at least, and I consider this my psychological victory. And of course I won the match. Yes, yeah. So USSR did collapse. And we had raw and fragile forms of market economy and democracy in Russia, and I thought, fine, the end of history. So and I have to say that Francis Fukuyama reflected the feelings of many of us in the early 90s, because we thought that's over, communism is gone, the Cold War is over, the West has won, the ideas of the free market and liberal democracy dominated the planet, no enemies left. Enemies are always there. So, and we gave him many years to recover and to come back, and that we're seeing it now. And I could see that, the Lenin's and Dzerzhinsky status being pulled down in Moscow and other countries. But it's, I couldn't believe when I saw the rise of a KGB lieutenant colonel to the top of Russian government. For me, it was like quite a shock. And I think anybody could be as rich as Bill Gates if he could bet in August '91, when the country was in jubilant mood and we saw the triumph of democracy and the end of communism, that 9 years later, a KGB officer would be the president of Russian Federation. And it had a chilling effect on me, but I said, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's a pragmatist. Maybe they could change. Maybe he would do a good job, because he looked nice. But certain things, they resonated when he said in one of his presentations there were no former KGB officers. Once KGB, always KGB. But the first thing he did after acquiring power in Russia in 2000, restoring Soviet anthem, that was unmistakable. It's like Freudist move. It revealed his true colors. So, and I knew that if he was given a chance, he would try to restore Soviet empire. So 1 year after Putin took office, I was far more realistic and accurate about him and his nature. In 2001, in January, I wrote in the Wall Street Journal, quote, "President Putin's KGB roots have sadly informed a style of governance that is neither reformist nor particularly democratic. The common thread throughout his domestic and foreign policies is his effort to trade on fear." That was the title of the article, Trading on Fear. The fears of Russians that their country is under attack from hostile external forces, Chechens, NATO, free marketeers. Instead of beating down the real hostile forces in Russia, corruption, ignorance, a bloated state, Mr. Putin cleverly changes the rules of the game. Painful domestic reforms were buried by powerful nomenclature lobbies. Corruption flourishes, and the judicial system remains too ineffective to be a stabilizing force. January 2001. Tragically, Putin was allowed to take those tendencies to their logical conclusion. The paranoid and aggressive police state Russia is today. So 4 years after I wrote that, I went from writing about the destruction of Russian democracy to taking an active role in trying to save it. I hate correcting you, Michelle, but you know, when I hear that I run for presidency in Russia, you know, it's, I want to laugh. Because in Russia, we didn't try to win elections. We tried to have elections. And I knew I would have no chance even to register my name. Because it's the moment somebody tells, you know, the Western audience about Garry Kasparov engagement in political activities in Russia, people are mistakenly, you know, thinking about registering political parties, fundraising, debates. No, the only debates we had was riot police. And unfortunately, my intellectual arguments didn't work out. I thought that it was important, and it's for me, though it was, I have to confess, it was a huge change in my attitude, because for years, I trained myself to be the winner. It was all about winning or losing. I had to make the difference and to win. And I knew from the very beginning it was not about winning. It was, you know, like a moral imperative. We had to be engaged in a battle where we couldn't win. We could just send a message. We could try to wake up more people, and maybe to sort of prevent Putin's authoritarian state to be turned in the most aggressive form of a one-man dictatorship. Some people told that, Garry, you failed. I don't know. So I failed if I would have failed if I had illusions about the outcome of this game. I think we haven't failed because my conscience is clean now, and I can tell my kids I did what I could. But also, we send the message. People know that we tried. And I don't think this fight, you know, has been buried, and it was without result, because my mother kept telling me all the time that negative result is also result. I mean, you tried, and you gained valuable experience not to make mistakes later on. As I said, it was not the most pleasant experience, because I was physically fit, but not fit enough to fight with police on the streets. Being arrested and harassed and beaten was not most pleasant experience, but as I said, I had to leave Russia in 2013 after being invited, quote unquote, to be a witness, quote unquote, for the investigative committee of Russia to tell them about one of the numerous political trials that Putin started against my colleagues. And I was actually abroad, and I called my dear friend Boris Nemtsov. I asked him about my next steps, and he said, Garry, you entered the building as the witness, and if you leave the building, most likely you will be a suspect. Stay out. So I wish Boris could follow this advice and staying out of Russia himself. But he was too brave and too proud to do that, and he was killed in front of Kremlin. Which, by the way, tells you about the true colors and the desperation of the regime. Killing an opposition leader in front of Kremlin, you know, just tells you that they have no rules to obey, and no fear of public opinion, whether inside Russia or outside of Russia. I also had my engagement with Human Rights Foundation. It's a New York-based foundation. The first chairman of the International Council was Václav Havel, and I was very proud when I was offered, after he passed away, to lead the organization. We have been doing definitely the largest largest dissident gathering in the world. It's called Oslo Freedom Forum. Every year in May, we have a massive event with people joining our forum from all the way from North Korea to Venezuela. And it's all about real stories. It's not ideologically driven. You know, we have North Korean defectors, we have Chinese art performers, we have gay activists from Africa, we have the freedom fighters from Latin America. So people of all stripes. All they have to bring to the forum is their personal story. And I'm very proud that I'm part of this effort, and we are growing in size. We have more freedom forums in other places, but Oslo event still remains so our key our key event. When Václav Havel died in 2012, nearly at the same time as the North Korean dictator, second Kim Jong-il, and it distracted everyone. Everybody talked about this thug, and very little attention was paid to the greatness of Václav Havel. I wrote, if we had more leaders like Václav Havel, we would not have nearly as much to worry about from dictators like Kim Jong-il. So I may never find anything as suited for me as chess. But I believe I was lucky that I had 10 years full of events. And it was not just human rights and Russia. I still spend a lot of time promoting the game of chess. Probably 1/3 of my time is chess for education. I have Kasparov Chess Foundation, started in New York in 2002. Grew up now. We have our representations in Europe, in Brussels, one to be opened in Croatia soon, in Johannesburg, in Singapore, in Mexico City. And also I had other interests. I've been doing many lectures and seminars on decision-making based on my book, How Life Imitates Chess. And then I developed other ideas because I've become very interested in the connection between the values of liberty and the values of technological innovation. The freedom to take risks and to pursue excellence with minimal interference and regulations. So these ideas brought me in contact with a whole new sphere of the Silicon Valley, investors and libertarians, and I built strong ties with Peter Thiel and Max Levchin, the founders of PayPal, and we worked for many years on the book project, and that which helped me to collect information about risk, innovations, and you know, I feel enriched because now I have other things to discuss. And that also helped me to sharpen my political and economic views. So with all the arguments you hear these days about big government versus small government, I'm particularly sensitive. I know what it's like to live under a real big brother. In May 2014, you could say my ideological intellectual journey reached its culmination as far away as possible after my collective upbringing. I delivered the keynote speech at the Cato Institute's Milton Friedman Prize dinner at the Waldorf Astoria in New York City. That's a long way from a Young Pioneers Club in Baku. In my speech, I said that I feared America was losing its way and that, now quote, for the government to get out of the way, the people have to demand it. Aiming high, believing in yourself and the power of your desires to change the world is an essential part of citizenship. The best way for a nation to strive is to stay out of the way of the dreams of its people as much as possible. The end of quote. And I've found other intellectual pathways leading from my previous life. I played computers. Everybody talks about computers. I even faced them. Yeah, people remember I played Deep Blue. I played other computers as well, but everybody asks me about Deep Blue, and everybody talks about 97 match. I lost in 97, but I won in 96. And I wanted to play the rubber match, the tiebreaker, but they retired the computer. Yeah, and I've been wondering what's happened with Deep Blue. You know, first I thought it was, directing traffic in Pittsburgh. But just, a couple of years, or last year, actually, I found out If you a frequent traveler and if in New York City, you can find out. It's now making sushi in JFK. It's a deep blue sushi bar. But it was not just about playing the computer. It also opened my mind for new formulas. You can have man versus machine. What about man plus machine? How can we find the best way of bringing together the human creativity and the brute force of calculation? Because that could be the most effective way of making decisions. Machines on their own, okay, fine, they're very powerful, but still they're lacking something. And chess could be a perfect field to actually make these experiments. You can eventually quantify human intuition by bringing human factor into the game. We had so-called freestyle chess, where you can play with computer, with other players, just any form of a team against another team. And amazingly, that it's while we all expected that the big computer loses to a man plus a strong computer, strong grandmaster assisted by a computer. But what was most amazing, that a strong grandmaster assisted by a computer was no match to a couple of weak players having 3 computers, because the process was superior. They actually found a way to maximize the effect of using the computing power, even without having a great knowledge of the game. So many things can be done, and I also spend time in promoting this idea and trying to share my experience in different occasions. I'm now a senior visiting scholar at the Oxford Martin School. I visit Oxford every year and just doing the lectures and workshops, again, talking about innovation strategy, man plus machine, and other things that are just relevant for my audience, doing regular seminars about strategy and decision making. So in all of these new areas, from politics to artificial intelligence to human rights, I went in knowing that I was no longer the world champion. I wasn't a beginner either, but I knew it would be more frustrating and in many ways even more challenging than being the world top chess player for 20 years. Okay, it was not easy either. Yeah. But chess was very natural to me. I was so lucky that when I was 5 or 6, who knows how old I was when I discovered chess, because nobody was tweeting it. Yeah, it happened, in one of the evenings in Baku when my parents looked at the chessboard, and I just discovered this miraculous composition of pieces, and I still keep my passion for the game. Chess was natural. It's like a native language, and I need to follow my twin guiding stars, seeking new challenges to motivate me and using my training to always look for connections, new frameworks to solve problems, and to see the biggest possible picture. The big picture. That's what I was good at when I played chess, and I'm trying to use my chess skills now to help others and to keep making the difference. Because the main reason I could stay on top for 20 years, because it was not just beating other opponents. It was always challenging my own excellence. It was all about making the difference. I remember one of the first lessons from my mother. She had a motto on top of my bed: if not you, who else? So it was all about me making the difference, and now I'm very comfortable that I could invest my knowledge, my experience, my energy, whatever is left of my energy, into new endeavors and working with others. And while Russia will always be important to me and always be my home in my heart, today I can see Russia as one part of a global fight for modernity and individual freedom against the forces that are trying to destroy it. They have always been there, and sadly, they are gaining strength today. This is the common threat, the big picture that connects Putin with Islamic State, with terrorists in Paris, to new socialist autocracies in Latin America. They're all trying to turn back the clock on the modern world of rights and liberty. And as for me, as with all of us, clock can only go forward. I can look back at myself as a boy in the USSR, as a young man struggling to reconcile my life and my education with the reality I saw with my own eyes. I remember the names, faces, and voices of colleagues who have died in the fight for democracy. Dictatorship is the ultimate enemy of liberty. It crushes not only the rule of law, but the freedom and creative human spirit that makes the modern world possible. I've spent my life learning, and I have found that in sharing what I have learned, I open the doors to learning even more. Chess taught me about decision-making, risk-taking, achieving under pressure, and processing huge amount of information into the big picture. These are all skills anyone can benefit from and improve on realistically, while becoming a world chess champion probably is not. But most of all, everything that I have seen and done has shown me that individual freedom means more than just free markets, just free speech, because that's what makes us human, and it's worth fighting for. Thank you. Thank you.